Lunch will be until 2:15 in the afternoon. So I guess we can get started. My name is Miguel Solana. I work for the International Labour Organization in Geneva in a program called the Impact Insurance Facility. And I'm going to be sort of leading this panel this morning on financial inclusion and microinsurance. So I want to welcome my panelists. I think we have a little bit less time than initially planned. So let me introduce our first panelist. This is Manuel Aguilera. He's the general manager from MAPFRE Economic Research. Then we have Mr. Adama Ndiaye. He's the president of the FANAF, the Federation of African National Insurance Companies. Then we have Mr. Recaredo Arias. He's the director general of the Mexican Association of Insurance Companies, AMIS. And finally, we have Dirk Reinhard. He's the vice chairman of the Munich Refoundation in Germany. So, I mean, our session is a little bit around microinsurance and financial inclusion. I think there has been, I would say, an evolution of the term microinsurance, which involved, like, how do we provide insurance for low-income people, into inclusive insurance, which is how do we provide insurance to secluded or, like, currently unserved segments of the population. So the objective of the panel for me is a little bit to have people coming from different backgrounds. We have one insurance company, we have two industry associations, and we have one foundation. And I think this provides us a healthy way of trying to see what have we been doing around that. So maybe I will get the panel started with, I think for me, one of the main questions a little bit like, I mean, what are the main challenges that the insurance industry is facing today to reach out to underserved segments of the population around the world? So maybe you can start with the industry.
Yes, sure. Well, good morning to all of you. Probably it's important for setting up the scene that when we think on under insurance, probably we should think of two different segments. On one hand, those excluded, I mean those that have no access to insurance, and another segment of people that already have access to insurance but is not properly covered by insurance. If you look at these two segments, we really have a problem of underinsurance, not only in the emerging markets, as it's usual to think, but also in the developed markets. So most of my comments, having said that, will be focused on the first segment, those unserved or excluded from insurance. What are the challenges? I think that challenges has to do with the barriers to reach out this population. And I see barriers or challenges from both sides, from the demand side and also from the supply side. On the demand side, it's clear that probably the most important challenge has to do with the low level of income of this population. It's difficult for people to buy insurance if they are not able to have a disposable income enough to buy some other essential things before that. So that's something that we have to take in mind. The low level of income of this population, as well as the very poor scheme of income distribution in these countries. Second, the nature of this income, which usually is not a regular stream of income. It's very seasonable. I mean, people receive money in some part of the years linked with their productive activity, and in some other part of the year they might have not receiving any money. And third, this issue of, again, from this demand side, that has to do with financial literacy. I am not really a fan of financial literacy as a concept, because I do believe in education, not in financial education. I think if you want to understand, and I shared what was said in the panel this morning, that it's quite complicated for regular people to understand complex financial products. The better you can understand, the better general education you have, education in language, legal aspects, mathematics, the better you can understand insurance products or financial products. So I think there's a poor level of education that implies a low level of financial literacy. On the other side, on the supply side, which has to do with the industry, we have other kind of barriers. I see on the first place that we still have inadequate business models. Insurance business model is very clear, very traditional, very well defined, but this business model is not necessarily the way in which you can reach out this population that should be covered by insurance. Second, on the supply side, the specific design of insurance products. There is usually in the industry, unfortunately, a trend to try to adapt traditional insurance products for this population instead of try to innovate and create specific products according to the needs of this population that you want to reach out. Third, and this is key from the supply side, has to do with distribution channels. The way in which insurance products are distributed traditionally is definitely not the way to reach out this population. There should be new ways to distribute insurance products in which you may reduce in a substantial way the transaction costs for population. And finally, on the supply side, regulation, which I think it's overestimated. I mean, I think it's overestimated impact of regulation on the development of microinsurance. In fact, you have many countries that already have specific microinsurance regulation in place, and you do not have the impact, the positive impact on the supply side. So I think it's an aspect that has some influence, but the core, I think, it has to do with the business model, the distribution channels, and the design of the products.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I mean, what is the view from two insurance associations? I mean, one in Africa, mainly Francophone Africa, and one in Latin America. Maybe Recaredo.
Yes. Maybe first of all, many thanks to Insurance Europe and UNESPA for inviting us to participate in this panel. This is a very amazing issue, and thank you to all of you to be present here with all the options that you have to receive important information. In my point of view, and of course, maybe I will repeat at least 2 or 3 of your issues, in accordance to several researches that has been done in the last years, the most important part of inclusive insurance challenges, and of course, it is quite good that nowadays we are not talking only one with regard of microinsurance. Microinsurance used to be to the bottom of the pyramid, to the people that has the lesser level of income. But in developed countries, we have not only, in my point of view, underinsurance. There are so many people that doesn't have any insurance coverage, or at least they are not conscious that they have an insurance coverage. For example, so many people can have credit cards, which has insurance coverages, but in so many instances they doesn't know that. Then in this part, I think that they are not covered because they are covering only liabilities or other kind of things, but they are not conscious of their insurance. Then taking in consideration that, in my point of view, taking all the researches that has been done, one part is insurance education and financial literacy, but the most important part should be consumer protection, because in microinsurance, this is a very, very important part, and of course in inclusive insurance, we have to be more aware of the importance of the consumer. In the other part, and becoming from so many years from the private sector, my point of view is that a suitable, pertinent regulation, it is very important indeed. In my point of view, it is very important to have a regulation that promotes the microinsurance, not in the way of India, for example, in which they have a compulsory participation in microinsurance. But we have to have, for all the companies that has the vocation and are advocate to do microinsurance, the regulation has to help those companies to have the proper products. On the other hand, I will finish very rapidly, but the most important part, in my point of view, is better understanding of the consumer needs and to have affordable and sustainable products. And another very important part is the balance between the claims paid to the customers and the cost of transformation, the cost of the providing of the product. Fortunately, and taking in consideration the landscape of microinsurance, we are improving the balance. In the last years, the percentage of claims paid was very low. In the last landscape from the last year, we have a participation of 49%, almost 50%, and the transformation costs are 20% for operational cost and 26% for acquisition cost. This is the main challenge, to provide more resources to the insured people. That's all.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Ndiaye, what are the challenges that you're observing in Africa for us to reach out to this big masses of underserved population?
Thank you. I want first to thank Insurance Europe for this opportunity. My language is French, and I have difficulty to express my ideas in English, but I'm going to do my best to be understood by you. In our zone, we have an organization named FANAF. FANAF is a common association of about 215 insurance companies in 29 countries. Our major sector is French-speaking companies. They are regulated by a common organization, CIMA. CIMA is the common regulator of 14 countries in Africa. And our first challenge was to inform CIMA and to inform our members of the opportunities we had. I'm going to give you some targets or some figures. In Senegal, my country, we have about 300,000 houses and apartments in Dakar. Less than 10% of them are insured. During the 5 next years, we had in the markets, big and small markets, about 443 fires. None of them were insured. We have a very good opportunity to include all this business in our activities. But our members have first to notice that microinsurance is a different insurance. We can't practice microinsurance as we practice classic insurance. And it was our first challenge. We organized many meetings, but the result was very low. During these 5 or 6 next years, we had only one society specialized in microinsurance was created in the 14 CIMA countries. And the initiative come from the big groups like AXA and Allianz. And now our big challenge is how to manage it, how to include technology, how to include agriculture, how to increase the other side of business in insurance. I'm going after to.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And lastly, maybe a little bit of the outsider view and a little bit more of the bird's eye view. Dirk.
Thank you. Again, also thank you for organizing this session. I think it's the first time for me that in a European conference this topic of inclusion of insurance is on the table. So some of the issues have already been raised, like the problem with the income, the low income. If I would say the 3 main topics, 3 main challenges are costs, costs, costs. Small insurance, high transaction costs. If I need to send you the policy in a letter, if I can't send you by email, then it's costly, no matter if it's 100,000 or a $10 insurance. Going to the client, we talk about many rural areas in India, in Africa. If you have, how can we go to the client, explain our product? That's very costly. That is related to, do the insurance companies understand the market? Do the insurance companies understand what the client is actually demanding? What is the risk that they want to insure? We don't have much market data. You mentioned the landscape study on microinsurance, the world map of microinsurance. We're trying to get this data, but it's very difficult to get data on what's the demand, what's the supply, what are the barriers, what products to work. So for a company to go in that market, it's quite difficult to understand what is my possible partner, what is the legal environment. So that's related to cost also, because you need to set up all this. And finally, when we talk, especially when we talk about health and NatCat insurance, we need governmental involvement. I facilitated a panel in Sri Lanka, and all insurers there said, we don't have weather data and we don't have a reliable entity that creates that data. That's the basis that we need. Without that data, we can't operate. The government is not providing it. When we talk about health insurance, you need health service first before you have a health insurance. So if there's no health care, health insurance is quite difficult. So we need to create the platform in order to be able to provide. At the same time, the demand is there and people have the ability to pay in certain senses. We spoke to farmers in Lima, around Lima. One farmer had insurance, the other farmer had a different crop, didn't get insurance. But he has some income, he has something to lose. And the product was simply not there, so it's not being provided. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Before I move into the next question, I want to invite you. You have an application on your mobile phones for the conference. So I open the floor to you to start using the application to feed some questions for us. I think I wanted to have the first line of challenges, to have a little bit of thought-provoking ideas. Now you can get started to come back to us. And then I'll move to my next question. I mean, we spoke about challenges, we spoke about business models, we spoke about like the demand side, like no resources, lack of culture, et cetera, et cetera. What are we doing? I mean, you are sitting in specific organizations. What is it that your organizations are doing to try to create this inclusion, to try to create these new business models, these new products that we're talking about? So maybe we can start again with the industry and.
Well, probably it's important to say that as we as an international group see that the most important part of the increase of the insurance market will take place in the emerging markets in the future. So that's why it's important from an industry perspective, try to reach out this population. But at the same time, this is important because of the social and economic development of those countries. We know that risks occur, and once that they occur, they produce losses. And the lack of mechanisms to deal with these losses it's a barrier for the social and economic development. So removing those barriers is a way to not only to expand the insurance industry, but also to improve the development of those countries in which this increase of the demand in many other segments of the population will take place. What to do? I think there are two main areas in which we should act, and we are acting. First, as Dirk was mentioned, I think this is an issue in which there should be a very close involvement of the governments. There should be not only risk awareness, but public policy awareness. I mean, it is needed that the government take some steps to try to create the proper incentives and create the social infrastructure to deal with microinsurance. For instance, information. Information should be developed through public policies as a public good that could be used for pricing properly microinsurance. So this is one area in which private insurance industry and their associations should deal closely with local governments. And on the other hand, on the side of the industry, there are a lot of things that should be done that we are doing. First, based on the available information, try to make the proper pricing of the products. This implies a lot of innovation. Again, not looking at the same kind of products that we sell to other segments of population, but try to think specifically of the kind of risks that this population need to cover. Second, try to reduce costs, operational costs, and specifically transaction costs using technology. The digitalization is an essential element for this purpose. And finally, trying to produce products that provide value to our customers, because this is a very singular kind of population. This is a very vulnerable population that once that you sell an insurance product to them, the best thing that you can do is to properly honor the compromise that you have selling this product. If you do not do that at the beginning, at the first time, then you might be losing a lot of time in this effort.
So it's a good experience.
Of
I mean,
course.
it's like your first
Basically.
experience, let it be a good experience.
That's right.
Perfect. Mr. Ndiaye, what is the FANAF doing around trying to push the boundaries for insurance to reach new people?
The first thing the FANAF doing was to organize meeting between regulator and insurance in order to improve the regulation. Now in CIMA zone, they consider that microinsurance is an activity like classic insurance. It's wrong. They haven't regulations specifically of technological or digitalization. We are moving to have a regulation to include digitalization in insurance, classic and microinsurance. And first, it's very difficult if you want to reach population who lives in villages. In Africa, you have more than 50% who are always living without electricity, without energy, without network. If you want to collect premium, if you want to sensibilize them to take insurance, you need a big support to your states, to your government. The government support is not yet really important for us to reach these populations. Now, our target is to inform first. The next step will be to organize with the Munich Refoundation learning session like the one who was organized, I think, in 2040 in Douala, in order to tell to all of them what is possible to do to upgrade the rate of penetration insurance in Africa. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. We have been working since several years in Mexico with the government, and I absolutely agree that the government has too much to do with this regard. It is very important to fix in the mind of the government that we have to work together in a private-public partnership with the governments with regard of the risk administration and how the risk administration has to be a public policy from the part of governments. In this case, we have been working with Prospera. Prospera is an aid program. It was receiving several names depending on the governments, but it has put in place in 93, 94. And it is an aid program for poor people and mainly for chiefs of family, women. Then they receive an aid every 2 months, and we have a program with the distributor of the money, which is a bank. The name of the bank is Bansefi. Then they are choosing 3 products: savings, loans, and insurance coverage. We are pushing an insurance coverage of around life insurance coverage of around 1,000 euros and burial services of 500 euros and a call center that provides health orientation. On the other hand, because of the earthquake, we have been working also since several years with the government of the City of Mexico and with the federal government throughout of Fonden, which is the fund that manages the money for the natural hazards that occurs in our country. Then we are creating a product in order to insure homes. We have, taking your example, 6% of voluntary insurance for houses in Mexico, and if we take in consideration mortgages, we go up to 26%, but the problem with this 20% is that those people doesn't have a complete coverage, because in some instances it is only the amount that the people owes to the bank, and the contents of the homes are not covered also. Then we are working in order to have some kind of subsidy or another kind of help and the distribution of the government for these products. We are working also in two versions with regard of insurance education. We have a contest for around 400 universities in Mexico, universities, with regard of prepare some advertisings of several lines, for example, radio, TV, social media, and we receive more than 1,000 works from the participants. And of course, the challenges are every year one topic with regard of insurance. Then in this way, they are learning. On the other hand, also with Prospera, we have been working teaching insurance, and we have been reaching 1.2 million people from the 7.2 million of people that receives the Prospera aid. It is important to say, to finish, that we have a response for the offer of insurance from the part of the Prospera people that has received the aid of 20% of they are buying, the 20% of the people is buying the insurance coverage.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, lastly, we have the Munich Refoundation. What is the Munich Refoundation doing?
Yeah, so I'm not covering Munich Re because Munich Re is active in various regions in the world. So the foundation, which is a non-profit think tank, we try to get the stakeholders on board because as we heard from Manuel and others earlier, government is important, the industry is important, the distribution channels are important. We need the donor organizations like the World Bank, the USAID, GIZ to develop products, to help set up schemes around education. So we organize an international conference which takes place in November every year, going around the world in a different country every year. This year it will be in Zambia, we have been in Senegal, in Mexico as well. And there we try to create a platform so that actually insurance industry can learn from other regions. One example, we'll talk about mobile later. Mobile payments are taking off in Africa, for example, and they're not taking off in other regions. I personally believe this is one of the biggest opportunity the industry is having. So what can we learn from one region? What can be adopted in the other region? So that's the international platform. Share knowledge, create, discuss what are the barriers and find solutions. We organize regional events because still we have overarching topics, but every region, every country is different. We have different topics everywhere, different languages, and we need to solve these languages locally. Recaredo mentioned the world map of microinsurance. Together with the microinsurance network, AXA is involved. We try to get data on the low-income insurance market, which is quite difficult, so I invite everyone to get on board and support that project as well. Industry needs to understand the markets, get data. Regulators need to understand what's happening and what are the developments. So this is what this platform is for. And so this is, I think, the two main activities that the foundation is doing.
Perfect, thank you. Now I have a question for the audience that I think it's quite pertinent now. It's a little bit like, is there a role for microinsurance in modernizing public development, I would say, aid programs? I mean, this is the question, and what do you envisage? So maybe from the side of the industry, what does the industry see that it can contribute in terms of public policy? I mean, what are the solutions that the insurance industry puts on the table in front of a government agenda?
When thinking of the kind of public policy that could be implemented, usually you can think of two different set of things. One that has to do with regulation, which in my view it's not the most important. Of course, there is a set of things that should be included in regulation as general principles to make feasible microinsurance. And the other has to do with the more general public policy that has to do with the increase of income of low-income population. On that area, I think that's the most important, the most critical in terms of trying to make feasible microinsurance. I think that there are a couple of things that could be done. One has to do with information, as I mentioned before. If you don't have enough information, the probability to design a product in which you can offer value to the customer is reduced. Second, trying to make easier some payment systems that could be affordable for this kind of population. The use, for instance, of the phone. That is quite usual in Africa, for instance. It is not as usual in Latin America because of legal problems that has to do with public policies that hasn't been properly designed. So in these kind of things that are key in the chain value for microinsurance, I think that once identified should be discussed and try to create awareness among the policymakers.
Okay, perfect. Dirk, do you have any ideas?
Well, what I find important is that we're not only talking about microinsurance, we're talking about risk management for the low-income market. That can be a micro product, one by one. That can be meso, the Fonden, the Mexican approach. That could be the African risk capacity. So risks that are affecting the low-income market. And in order to come up with these solutions, we need this legal governmental framework. The G7 decided to get 400 million people into climate risk insurance by 2020, which is a huge challenge. So public policy need to take that up and say, we need to set up these schemes before something happens, not after something happens, because then that's too late. We need to do the proper risk assessment, have a plan, what do we do if something happens, and then have the funds available so that whatever the prevention did not prevent, we can pay rapidly so that people can start rebuild their lives. It's quite devastating to look at some Caribbean islands that were just wiped away and there's still no one living. And none of us wants to run around with a begging ball, as Stefan Dirk said from Oxford University, to get money after disaster. So the government needs to understand that this is his responsibility. His approach of walking around with a check after disaster is maybe not the efficient one. Industry can come up with more efficient solutions, and together then we can create this solution.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And that, I think, I got a question from the audience that I think leads perfectly into the business model part. I mean, and this is a little bit, is microinsurance part of the CSR, of the corporate social responsibility of the industry, or is this a real business model? What do we think about that? I see maybe Recaredo.
This is a very interesting question. In my point of view, should be a business model. As I was saying before, in the case of India, it is a failure to have a compulsory participation of microinsurance. Then if the company doesn't have the vocation, doesn't have the orientation to go to microinsurance, they will not do properly, and they will not do because they are convinced of the social responsibility that they have. But they should have the vocation and, of course, the orientation as a business model, because it has to be sustainable, and in the long term, it has to provide proper profits. And look into the future, as happens in India, in Bangladesh, when the people is included in the economy and goes to upper levels of income, of course, will have the ability to buy more products of insurance that are more profitable, but they are convinced since the beginning.
Perfect. Maybe. Yeah.
I think that microinsurance have his own business model. We can't consider it like classic insurance, and in our zone, you have a particularity. It's very difficult to define what is microinsurance. Is it insurance for poor persons, or insurance for all those who are not in formal activities? And now it's a very big difficulty to have. Before our augmentation, we saw many persons who are traders and who had big, who were very rich and who were able to pay more than $10 or $20 every day as they subscribe microinsurance product. But now, all these products are in classic business, because the regulator decide all premium were more than $7 a month were, not less than $7 a month was microinsurance, and which is more, is going to be classic insurance. It's the first difference. The second difference, to reach all these people, we need to engage many expenses. In classic insurance, when you have 100, you have just to expand about 15 to manage your business. In microinsurance, we have between 25 and 40% of premium to support our expenses. It's very high, and we have an opportunity to include these persons, but we have to take all opportunities in technological business to reach them and to insure them.
Perfect. Manuel?
Well, I certainly agree with Recaredo and Adama that microinsurance implies a very specific business model. But I think at the same time, I mean, microinsurance is both things. I mean, it's a business model, but it's also part of the corporate social responsibility. I mean, especially in insurance, in which the business model itself has to do with this social responsibility with society in terms of protecting against risk and make feasible the possibility to increase wealth and income levels and population and economic growth and so on.
Okay, and then maybe my next question for you is like, what are the business models that you see emerging that are making sense, that are being sustainable, that we should be paying attention to? Dirk.
Can I just add one sentence to the previous one?
Perfect.
These are, insurance has to be self-sustaining, so no insurance company wants to lose money, so it must be a business. Some insurance products around health, around NatCat may need governmental support, so there's like a role of various stakeholders, as we said earlier. About the CSR question, is it not responsible, not offering insurance? Insurance plays a role in economic development. If you don't offer that risk management tool, economy will not develop in the same way as with that risk management tool. So not offering insurance, maybe not fulfilling the role that we have in the economy and the society, put it that way. Not offering water as a water company would also be seen as irresponsible. So insurance have a role to play, and I just heard from Colombia after the post-war that what happens if people that stopped the fight, went back to the rural areas, became a farmer? What happens with them after the next drought, after the next landslides? So they lose everything, but where can they go? So insurance has a really responsible role, important role for the economic development. Now the business models, as I said earlier, I think the development that we see in mobile payments is really enormous. According to the GSMA Association, we have 650 million registered mobile wallet accounts. So for those who don't know how it works, you have a prepaid phone in most developing countries. That prepaid, you put money on your contract, on your phone. That's kind of like a little account. You can send $1 to another person by sending a message. That ability of having an account in your pocket, of being able to send money, is also a huge opportunity for the insurance industry, because it's a very efficient way to get a hold of payment streams. So 650 million people that probably 10 years ago didn't have an account, didn't have the ability to pay, is enormous, and that's a big opportunity, because attached to the phone is other GPS, location, you can send people information and so on. So that's, I think, something you need to think about. Allianz just bought 100 million, Allianz invested 100 million in a company called Bima. AXA bought microinsurance. So companies see that opportunity. And for me, that's the biggest business model that's coming up, not only for micro and the underdeveloped market, but also for the so-called developed markets.
Perfect. I see that one of the most important challenges for the design of a business model is the approach to the customer. As we were saying in the challenges, in one hand we have the adequate design of the products fitting the real needs of the people, and on the other hand, how to bring the product to the public, how to do accessible the product to the public. And in this part, it is very important to evolve as a business model to the insurtech startups. We have to incubate and accelerate more insurtech facilities, mainly with regard of all of them which are helping the insurance companies to merchandise, to distribute the products. We have to take a profit from all the tools of robotic advice, or only information with regard of the products, or the tools that serves to choose the proper product, and to have all the facilities in order that those people get and have the product. Of course, as was saying Manuel, in the case of our country, specifically in Mexico, we have a problem because there are a fight between the banks and the telephonic carriers. Then in Africa, it has been solved in a very easy manner. The telephonic company is the bank. In our case, they are fighting who are the owner of the business, and meanwhile, we are not accessing to the public. Then we have to have the proper facilities. On the other hand, in the case of carriers of insurance, we push that the regulation worldwide has to go and has to evolve to a model in which if we have the same activity, we should have the same regulation, even though we can have a sandbox for 2 years and to get a certain level of a certain amount of activity, and if not, you die or you convert in a normal insurance company.
Perfect. I think that the challenge of this business model is how to integrate technology in our business. Now, mobile money gives us a big opportunity to reach a large part of our population. But we have first to solve some difficulties between regulators. In CIMA zone, we have 2 regulators for the banks. And these regulators said they are the only one who manage all financial activities. We have also a regulator for all 14 countries in insurance business. And you have 40 different regulators on telecommunication. And if you want to decide, you have first to have a meeting with all of them and to have the same view. It's very difficult to do it. And after, you have a technical service provider. Technical service provider and mobile money provider, they are very big companies, and we have small companies. How to manage our respective interest? It's our very, very, very big difficulty now. Thank you.
Manuel.
Well, I think that we are looking at internationally that are emerging new business models for microinsurance. But if you look at the different kind of risks that you may cover through microinsurance, you can see that there will be needed different business models for these kind of risks. The use of mobile phones, for instance, may help in terms of premium collection or claims payment, the beginning at the end of the life cycle of the product. But in the middle, you have to use different kind of technologies according to the risk that you are going to cover. It's different if you are going to cover traditional life insurance product, in which you only have a proof of death and then just to go to the payment. That if you are covering automobile or crop insurance or health insurance or pensions, I mean, the way in which technology should be used as part of this middle part of the business model should be completely different. So there is a challenge not only in terms of thinking of new business model for microinsurance, but for a specific line of business of microinsurance.
Yeah. Before we continue, I want to open up the floor. Do we have any questions from the audience that you may want to ask? Or I may, yeah, here. Oh, so it's been sent through the application. So I just thought that if people were not sending them through the application, I mean, because then this moves a little bit the thing a little bit about inclusion. I mean, is microinsurance the only model to include the excluded? And I mean, a little bit like thinking about the developed world. I mean, what can we learn from the microinsurance lessons that we have been having from developing and emerging countries? And how can this sort of shed some light in terms of like how to reduce the protection gap that we're facing in the developed world?
Okay.
Yeah, got it.
There is a very important thing that broke some of our ideas with regard of that the people of low income is not capable, it is not able to acquire an insurance policy. And this is something that we have to apply to the inclusive insurance. We have now in Mexico around 12 million people served by microinsurance, and then we have to go to the pymes, to the medium-sized companies, and we have to go to the medium-sized people that are uncovered by insurance. Because we broke this idea that and the best way to have an education for those people is that when they receive the payment of the claim. This is the best way in which they learn how the insurance serves to protect their goods or their health or the life of the head of the family.
Okay, perfect.
Well, I think there is an important point of this question. First, microinsurance is not the only way to create inclusion in insurance. There are some other ways in which other unserved or underserved population could be reached. For instance, mass sale of insurance or new ways to distribute traditional insurance products. And on the other hand, on the issue of the protection gap for developed markets, again, looking at the situation of microinsurance in emerging markets in which you see there is a lack of enough insurance of traditional life insurance, automobile insurance, health, pensions, and so on. In developed markets, you also see that there are at least some emerging risks that are not properly covered for the population in these developed markets, namely cyber risk, pensions, of course, in which insurance could also be an important part to deal with a huge problem of sustainability, long-term sustainability of pension systems, and also the effect of natural catastrophes due to climate change, which may also affect these developed markets.
Yeah, perfect. And I mean, personally, regarding this question, when I started working on microinsurance 10 years ago, I remember having a conversation with some of my colleagues and having clarity that what we defined as microinsurance already back then, I mean, it relates to me a lot to what we were talking about in the previous panel when we were talking about simple products that are easy to understand, that try to reduce exclusions as much as possible, where I don't have to read a lot in order to understand the product. And I believe that over time, I mean, this idea that we had, I believe like what we felt it was microinsurance, I think it's becoming a little bit like where the insurance industry seems to be having to go, meaning relevant covers to me. You know, I want to insure things that matter to me, that touch me whenever something bad happens. And I believe the evolution, and it's weird to see like 10 years later, I mean, this discussion that we were having on or what should insurance industry be going with the low-income population, it's actually becoming like a mainstream thing. And I think this is being proved by this kind of things like Dirk was talking about, like Allianz buying a big stake in Bima that has a big experience in designing this kind of products and delivering this kind of and running this kind of partnerships to deliver these products, a microinsurer being acquired by AXA. So I think what we see is also a lot of, I would say, reverse innovation. Maybe it's not happening directly under the name microinsurance, but I think we have been learning a lot from what has been happening in this front, both in terms of product design, both in terms of technology, and in terms of partnerships, and how this will come back through these big insurance companies. I think this is maybe the next question and something that we should be waiting to see. I think something that, I mean, and this brings a little bit maybe the next question, I mean, this experience, and and maybe to our panelists sort of being based in developed countries, is microinsurance as a concept suitable for the EU countries, considering the previous implications, EU regulations, and so on? I mean, what do we think a little bit like, how do we apply all that we have seen in these developing emerging economies into the EU? Yeah.
Well, I think, why did we call it microinsurance? Because we were talking about markets where you could not just go next door to an insurance company, you didn't have electricity, many people can't even read. So the environment in which we were operating are not as we do see it in Europe. In Europe, there are banks everywhere, there are insurance companies everywhere, everyone more or less has electricity. So it's a completely different level. So I wouldn't call it microinsurance there. But just going back to your previous question, what can an EU market learn is efficiently managing large ticket items. So I think this is one of the biggest challenges. And having organizations, we mentioned some of them already, that do a fully digitalized product, which is relatively simple, because if you have lots of exclusions, people that never bought insurance before may not ever buy insurance again if something has been included and they had a big loss. So simple products is important, and I think that could be applied in European markets as well. I know that the industry doesn't really like to hear that, but keep it simple, stupid, as the Middleman Microinsurance Center once said that. And increasing efficiency by really using technological solutions, which at the same time needs the regulatory environment, because if you still have to send a written, printed policy to a client, then digital insurance doesn't work. So, yeah.
Yes, in my point of view, and I absolutely agree with you, Dirk, it is not a matter of labels. It is not a matter of names. It is not if it has to be named microinsurance. The point is, there are so many people underserved or non-served by insurance. Then it happens in the European Union and it happens in USA, and they recognize that there are so many people that doesn't have an insurance coverage. Then we have to learn, as you say, Dirk, all the lessons learned with regard of microinsurance can serve with regard of the most important processes in the insurance industry and in the insurance providing of a product, as you were saying, Manuel, the process of selling the product, to cash it, to pay claims, and those lessons can serve to design the products. And this is the most important part, as we were saying before. The design of the product that fits the real needs of the customers that we want to serve is the most important part.
Perfect.
Probably I would like just to, as a former regulator, to add something on this issue. I think that you're right, Dirk, in terms that we can learn from what we have done on microinsurance, in terms also on how to adapt regulatory framework in developed markets. For instance, when discussing the microinsurance regulation, one of the issues was how can we, the insurance company used to say, how can we sell these products without having so many rules to comply with? And the answer of the regulator was, well, if you want not to comply with so many rules, you have to simplify the product to make it easier to understand. So if you can make it easier, then you can comply without without using so many rules. So this is something that can be now applied to traditional insurance. We have heard the consumer representative in the previous panel saying how difficult it is really for the people to understand insurance products. So if we as industry are capable to make simple insurance products, probably we will have the reaction on the other side of the table from the regulators to make more simple the way in which we can deliver our products.
Perfect. And this leads, I mean, a little bit to another question also from the audience, and it is a little bit about the regulation. I mean, Recaredo, you mentioned the sandbox, I mean, which is one of the regulatory tools that we're seeing around. I mean, how can regulators be enablers for insurance inclusion and financial inclusion in general? What are key ideas that you see where the regulators could take lead in supporting the industry to move forward with these new ideas?
Well, as we were saying, it is very important that the idea of the regulators, and I am glad that you, and agree with you, Manuel, that you are saying that the regulators and the industry participants and associations, of course, has to work together in order to provide easier products in a better manner and using the technology. And this is a key point. On the other part, with regard of the sandboxes and insurtechs and the use of the digital technology, we have a huge challenge. We recently, 3 months ago in Mexico, addressed the law of fintech, which includes insurtech. We are in the process of provide with the secondary level regulation, and it will cover, of course, throughout the National Insurance Commissioner, the insurtech regulation for, to deal with this digital world. And we think that we have to have this regulation around the world, because it is not a regulation that creates obstacles to the technology, but regulates the way in which a sandbox, for example, has to work, for how much time has to has to take, and the level of operations that has to have.
Yeah. I think that our regulator had to change their rule. Before, we have repressive regulation, and they need to understand all you have to do before giving you the authorization to begin your activities. And now they have to change their mind and to make their confidence in insurance companies. We have to experiment like in South Africa or Kenya, the test and learn. You have first to authorize without knowing anything. And during, by the way, you can make a regulation to correct what is wrong. I think that is the other way we have to develop microinsurance and inclusion in our countries. The first step is to keep the confidence. When classic insurance pay losses, automobile losses after 4 or 6 months, it's not easy to have the confidence of micro insurance services. We have to reduce our reduce and to improve our rules of payments. It's the other way we have to explore.
Perfect, thank you. Manuel, as a former regulator.
No, I think that now this new trend for the use of technology as part of the financial services, which is the origin of this idea of the sandboxes, it's a good way to try to, that could be repeated as well in the microinsurance world, try to use this same concept of pilot programs or sandboxes to try to find out the best, or to find the fine-tuning of these specific business models. Of course, the issue there, and I'm sure that's the main concern of the industry in Mexico with this fintech law, has to do with not to create regulatory arbitrages that could hamper competition in the marketplace, which is, I think, the key issue on this part.
Perfect. So we're running out of time. I just wanted to share some final ideas. I mean, some research from McKinsey a few years ago was saying there's around 2 billion people that are financially excluded, meaning, I mean, let's say like twice the population of China in this world that have no access at all onto financial services. If we manage to breach this gap in the coming 10 years, I mean, the world would be able to add up a little bit like an economy the size of Germany to the global output, which shows like what, I would say that shows the impact that financial services have in today's world, because they bring efficiencies, they bring the capacity to invest, to reduce vulnerability, and so on. I think this is reflected in the, I mean, working for the United Nations, I mean, in the current global development agenda. I mean, insurance plays, I wouldn't say like the most important role, but it plays a very significant role in some of the sustainable development goals. I mean, we talk about that, I mean, I think the challenge is around how do we make insurance play its role in this agenda? And I think this panel has been a wonderful opportunity to explore a little bit some of these ideas around the world on risk management, but also in the mobilization of long-term savings, in the structural things that it can bring towards zero hunger, like food security, and other kind of partnerships for the long-term development, like long-term projects and infrastructure. So I think the big challenge remains there. I mean, how can we make insurance fulfill its promise on social development and economic development? So with this reflection, I want to wrap up this panel. Thank you very much, and I hope we gave you some inspiration for your work.